Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and if you were a teenager in the early 2000s, I would bet money that you will remember this riff. I mean, I first heard it over 20 years ago, and to this day, anytime it comes along, I cannot help but sing along. And so that brings us to the topic of today's video, CKY. After blowing up via Bam Margera's series of videos that were somewhat confusingly also named CKY, CKY, the band, went from being a relatively unknown band from Westchester, Pennsylvania, to signing a major label deal, hitting the Billboard Top 100, getting placements in massive games like Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, and it seemed like they were well on their way to semi-mainstream success, like maybe they could be the next Deftones, Static X, or Mudvayne. Except that never happened. They were accused of harassing a journalist, they got dropped by their label, and there were constant rumors of conflict within the band, including even a fistfight on their bus. And so by 2011, their founder, Deron Miller, had quit the band, and they had lost almost all their momentum outside the most diehard members of their fan base. So what happened? What is behind the rise and fall of CKY? One of the 2000s most promising rock bands. I will do my best to answer that question in this video. But first, if you haven't, check me out on Twitch. I am streaming twice a week from 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and there's a link to that in the description of this video. The origins of CKY go way back to 1992, where future CKY guitarist and vocalist Deron Miller met the drummer Jess Margera in their high school math class. They immediately hit it off and did a few bands together. The first one was kind of a progressive metal thing called Foreign Objects, and the next band was called Oil, which I really think of as the foundation for CKY. For example, this song where they mentioned the town of Hellview that would go on to be the subject of many CKY songs. And during the recording of what was supposed to be Oil's full-length album, they met Chad Ginsburg, the producer, who joined the band on guitar, and they changed the name of the band to Camp Kill Yourself, which Deron Miller thought of as, in his mind, the perfect name for a horror movie. And in parallel to that, Jess's brother, Bam Margera, was starting his own career as a skateboarder and filmmaker, and that is what gave the band their first break when Bam used their song Genesis 12A for his part in the Toy Machine video Jump Off a Building in 1998. But their real breakthrough was in 1999 when Bam released the first CKY video, also known as Landspeed back then because the first version of it was put out by the wheel company Landspeed. And that video almost instantly became an underground viral hit in the skateboarding scene. I remember my friend asking me, dude, have you seen the Landspeed video? It's the best thing I've ever seen. So of course I had to check it out, and he was right. That video was absolutely amazing. It was hilarious, it was fun, there was cool high energy skating, and I also noticed all the great music in the video, which was really just the perfect soundtrack to all the skateboarding and pranks. I didn't recognize any of it, so I wanted to know who it was, and my roommate at the time told me that it was Bam's brother's band, who were called Camp Kill Yourself. And we found out that they had an album featuring all the songs from the video, and that was it. We were officially fans of CKY. And with those first CKY videos selling well over 1 million copies and God knows how many like dubs and bootlegs, there were tons and tons of other people all over the world who found the band in the same way, which is a pretty interesting story in kind of like grassroots marketing. As Jess Margera said in an interview with Jankum, the music industry didn't have anything to do with us getting popular. popular. It was mostly through Thrasher, Big Brother, and Transworld. They covered us all the time, and then all of our albums were in skate shops, not really record shops so much. Our album ended up selling 50,000 copies before we had even been in a record store. Then, finally, all the labels took notice of that, and we signed with Island Def Jam. Squarespace gives people a powerful and beautiful platform from which to create your website. You can connect with your audience and generate revenue through gated members-only content, meaning you can manage your members, send email communications, and leverage audience insights, all on one easy-to-use platform. Create a community on your Squarespace website with a fully integrated commenting system that supports threaded comments, replies, and likes, and use their powerful blogging tools to categorize, share, and schedule your posts as well. And extend Squarespace's already powerful e-commerce capabilities with Squarespace extensions. These new third-party tools can help you manage inventory, promote products, streamline bookkeeping, reconcile and file sales tax, and ship items from across the globe. You can also display posts from your social media feeds directly on your website and automatically push content to all your social media channels so your followers can share it too. So if that sounds cool, and it probably should, go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to the link in the description of this video to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And so they released their major label debut, Infiltrate Destroy Rebuild, in 2003, featuring the lead single Flesh into Gear, which you may recognize from CKY2K. And this is when Jackass was just absolutely exploding. And with their ties to Bam, it seemed like the band had a lot of momentum. They were on Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, and they even opened for Guns N' Roses at the personal request of Axl Rose himself. And so with all that momentum behind them, they released their next album, An Answer Can Be Found, in 2005, which ended up hitting number 35 on Billboard. Not bad for a band that always seemed to be ignored by the music industry, and basically succeeded purely on their ability to build up that hardcore grassroots fan base. And the lead single for this album was Familiar Realm.
If they told you who to be, you've entered a familiar realm.
And personally, as much as I loved their first album when it came out, and I still do, I think this album might be the best thing that they ever did. It was still heavy and weird with those signature Deron Miller octave riffs, but it was really catchy and upbeat at the same time. It seemed like the band was really firing on all cylinders creatively. But behind the scenes, things were getting pretty ugly. For one, their love for partying and just like overall chaos was starting to get a little bit out of control. For example, this story from Jess. We went back to our hotel completely blasted out of our minds. Then we had this massive food fight, of course, and they had to like recarpet, repaint, you know? So we got this massive bill from the hotel that Mercury Records had to pay. Back then it was that big of a deal. People bought albums, so a $28,000 hotel bill is like, yeah, we were partying, whatever. There was also an incident where Rolling Stone gave their album a 1-star review, and their fans came after the writer. As the writer said in an email to their label, in the past few days, I've been deluged by copies of the new CKY record sent to my home address and purchased by Deron Miller from a variety of sites online. They also left their label Island and publicly trashed the label in the process. Deron Miller said in an interview, it was clear that the label had no idea how to market a band that doesn't write songs about breaking up with their girlfriends. And there were reports of the band getting into actual physical fights with each other. As one example, again according to Deron, after the San Diego show, I started getting really depressed and couldn't eat or sleep, so of course I started drinking more. Then he claims that back on the bus, he heard some of the other members of the band talking shit about him, and it escalated. I slapped Jess's hat off his head, and the two of them jumped me after I put on my backpack to leave the bus. There must have been a third because I felt at least 5 limbs. And after that, he quit the band, saying that CKY carrying on without him would be, quote, laughable and illegal because he wrote all the songs and claimed to own the name of the band, although the band said that they would indeed go on without him. And if you're noticing a common thread here behind all this chaos, well, to put it simply, it is Deron Miller. I'm sure that all the guys in the band could be hard to handle at times in their own way, but it seems like he has been consistently at the center of all these conflicts. And by his own admission, it sounds like his drinking was definitely a problem as well. He said himself, "I was out of control, throwing up 20 times a day." And still, with all of that chaos going on behind the scenes, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but somehow or another, they were able to patch things up and put the band back together, at least enough to release their fourth album, Carver City, in 2009 on Roadrunner Records, which was kind of a concept album about this fictional resort town named after a fisherman who killed his whole crew. I personally think it's a solid album, and it got generally good reviews.
Panic flags, our numbers rise. Don't open your eyes.
And so it seemed like they were back on track, but actually, as it turned out, that was effectively the end of CKY as the fans knew it. And in hindsight, the creative differences in the band were really obvious. In an interview they did when they were on tour in the UK in 2011, where every member of the band basically had a different vision for CKY. Deron and Jess had the idea of every member of the band recording their own solo album and then releasing all of them as one package, kind of like Kiss did back in the day. Meanwhile, Chad hated that idea, and it just seemed like everything was very tense.
If I'm doing a solo record, I probably don't feel like titling it CKY because it's not, so I would probably just put it out on my own. I don't know why we have to put them all together.
Which apparently was the case, because in 2011, shortly after that interview, Deron announced on Facebook that he was quitting the band. "No one within the whole CKY community keeps in touch with me at all or tells me anything, so in addition to a zillion other reasons, it's no longer a possibility for me to be part of CKY." And Jess Margera, who was kind of the unofficial leader of the band, I think, didn't directly address any of Deron's accusations, but in his response, I think he kind of said it all. "Alcohol is a fucking serious problem. Bam is going through it too, and about a dozen other people that I know. Deron needs our support right now." And a lot of the fans just kind of assumed that that would be the end of CKY, since Deron was not only the founder of the band, but also its creative heart. He was the singer, he wrote almost all the music, and his signature guitar tone was really integral to the whole sound of the band. And to make matters even worse, Chad Ginsburg also quit the band, who was a critical member of the band as their producer. He recorded and mixed all their albums. But yet again, CKY didn't let that slow them down, and the band chose to go on without Chad or Deron, replacing Deron with a guy named Daniel Davies, and returning for Australia's Soundwave Festival in 2012. And initially, Deron fought them over the use of the name CKY, which honestly sounds pretty fair to me given that he thought of the name and he was the main writer for the band. In all fairness, he does seem like an extremely difficult guy with a lot of problems, but in a lot of ways, he really was CKY. But apparently Bam had actually trademarked the name in conjunction with his videos, and so the band was able to continue using the name CKY even though it was Deron's idea, something which Deron was understandably not too happy about. And CKY was basically in limbo for a few years, as Deron basically continued to talk shit about all the other members and focused on his other band World Under Blood, which I have to say are pretty damn good death metal.
There's no real way to make the best of the worst. We are sentenced at birth unto a prison. We still call the earth.
But eventually CKY came back in 2016 with yet another lineup, this time as a three-piece with Chad Ginsburg on guitar and vocals replacing Deron, with Jess on drums and a new bassist, with their first show at a festival called the Random Hero Fest in honor of their friend Ryan Dunn, who I'm sure all of you know sadly passed away. And with that, the band was officially back. They returned to the studio in 2017 to record their fifth album, The Phoenix, and personally, I was really happy to see them back with new music for the first time in almost 10 years. But in my personal opinion, honestly, it really just doesn't sound like CKY. Where CKY was always kind of weird, proggy, and left of center, this album was more like straightforward rock that was certainly not bad by any means. It just felt like something that should have come out under a different name.
I have no pity, I have only hate. Love to see you suffer, I'm obviously doing great.
which from what I can tell is pretty much how most people felt about it. And the band had one more lineup change in 2019 when their bassist Matt Dice left to focus on his family, leaving them in their current state of Jess Margera and Chad Ginsburg, with friends filling in on bass here and there. Deron Miller also has a new band called 96 Bitter Beings, obviously referencing CKY, and honestly it sounds more like CKY than CKY does these days, which does kind of support the idea that he was the creative heartbeat of the band. And most recently, he was announced as the new frontman for the old school death metal band Malevolent Creation, which you may recognize from the CKY videos. And with all of that said, as talented as Deron Miller very clearly is, it still seems like he is honestly somewhat unstable and hard to work with. For example, when he posted this long, angry Facebook rant after losing 2 members of his band. There are also tons of stories from people who claim that he didn't send things out that he was supposed to after his crowdfunding campaign, about him being rude to fans in person and online, about him allegedly selling fake Kiss albums on eBay, and so forth and so on. There is no shortage of stories about people who had a bad run-in with Deron Miller. And it should be mentioned that Malevolent Creation, the death metal band that he just joined, is very openly racist. Like, this band actually has the N-word in their songs. The guitarist has worn Klan shirts on stage. It's pretty bad. I think to sum up the way that most people feel about Deron Miller, it would be when Bam Margera called him a poisonous cocksucker.
I'm so sorry, Darren's just a poison cocksucker. I can't help it. I can't explain it. So embarrassing.
And so the last question is, what is the legacy of CKY? Well, even if they aren't what they used to be, I think they'll always be a special band to people who grew up with them in the early 2000s. Personally, I think that all their albums with Deron still hold up, still sounds like really cool and unique. Really never heard anything exactly like that before or since. And so the biggest question that I have is, what could they have been if all that drama and conflict didn't tear the band apart? And unfortunately, we will just never know the answer to that question. All right, my friends, that does it for this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. Also, I want to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. Patrons get all my podcasts early. There are members-only channels on my Discord that I'm super active in. I do giveaways, and there is a way to have me review your music or artwork or anything else. Every month, I do a call for submissions. If you want me to review something, just drop it in the comments of that post. Then I will review it live on Twitch and post it on Patreon for everyone to see. So if that sounds cool, hit the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.